Relax, he still believes me.
Those 6 words stopped me cold in the hallway outside our kitchen at 11:42 on a Thursday night. I remember the exact time because the microwave clock glowed green through the darkness like it wanted me to see the moment my marriage cracked open. I'd just gotten home from a 12-hour shift estimating concrete costs for a hospital expansion outside Columbus, Ohio. My shoulders ached. My boots were wet from freezing rain. All I wanted was a hot shower and whatever leftovers Claire had stuffed into the fridge. Instead, I stood there holding my truck keys while my wife laughed softly into her phone like I was some joke she'd already stopped respecting. "It was nothing," she whispered. "He still believes me." Then another voice answered through the speaker. A man's voice, calm, familiar. Nathan Reed. I knew that voice because I'd shaken his hand 3 months earlier at Claire's company Christmas party downtown. Marketing consultant, perfect teeth, expensive watch. The kind of guy who leaned too close when he talked to married women. My stomach tightened so hard it felt like somebody had pulled the cable through my chest. I should have walked in right then. Most men probably would have. Demand answers, start yelling, throw accusations across the kitchen island like broken glass. But something about the way Claire laughed stopped me. It wasn't nervous laughter. It wasn't guilt. It was confidence. That hurt worse. So I stayed quiet. The hallway smelled faintly like vanilla candles and garlic from dinner. Rain tapped against the windows over the sink. Claire stood barefoot in one of my old college sweatshirts, twirling a strand of blonde hair while she stared out into the backyard like she didn't have a husband standing 10 feet away, listening to his life collapse in real time. "I'll talk to you tomorrow," she whispered into the phone. "Good night." Then she ended the call and turned around so suddenly, I barely had time to step into the living room. "Oh," she said, pressing a hand against her chest. "You scared me."
Fast. Too fast. Controlled. Practiced. I held up my keys. "Long day."
"I heard the truck,"
she said casually. "Who were you talking to?" I asked. Not aggressive, not suspicious. Just tired. Claire walked toward me without hesitation and kissed my cheek. Warm lips, cold feeling.
"Nathan from work," she said. "It was nothing."
There are moments in life where your instincts scream louder than logic. That was one of them. Because married people know each other's rhythms. We know pauses, eye movements, tiny shifts in breathing. Claire answered too smoothly, like she'd rehearsed it already. "Nathan called at almost midnight?" I asked. She shrugged and opened the fridge.
"We've got a presentation Monday. Don't make it weird, Daniel." Don't make it weird. Funny how 4 harmless words can make a man feel like a stranger in his own house. I nodded slowly like I believed her, because part of me still wanted to. 14 years of marriage doesn't die in one conversation. Not immediately. It dies slowly, quietly, like a ceiling beam cracking behind drywall where nobody can see it yet. Claire pulled leftover baked ziti from the fridge and asked if I wanted some. I watched her move around the kitchen like everything was normal. Same dishes, same granite counters, same wedding photo hanging near the pantry from a beach trip in Sarasota 15 years earlier. 2 smiling people who looked absolutely certain they'd grow old together. Looking back now, that picture feels like evidence from another lifetime. "You okay?" Claire asked. "You seem off." That almost made me laugh. Off. My wife had just whispered secrets to another man while I stood in the dark, listening like an unwanted guest, and somehow I was the one acting strange. "I'm fine," I said quietly. She studied me for a second too long before nodding. "Good," she said, because I'm exhausted. Then she carried her plate upstairs without another word.
I stayed alone in the kitchen, listening to the refrigerator hum. Rain kept falling outside. Somewhere upstairs, floorboards creaked softly beneath her footsteps. I stared at my reflection in the black kitchen window and realized something ugly. I didn't trust my wife anymore. Not fully. Maybe I hadn't for longer than I wanted to admit. The signs had been there. The locked phone screen, the late meetings, the way she smiled at texts she never shared. But love makes fools out of decent men. We explain things away because the alternative feels too heavy to carry. That night, though, something changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. Quietly, like a switch flipping inside my chest. I let her talk, because by then, I already knew something she didn't. My phone had recorded everything. The strange thing about betrayal is that the moment itself is never as painful as the replay afterward. It is the next morning when it really starts sinking its teeth into you. I woke up at 5:12 before my alarm even had the chance to go off. The house sat quiet except for the furnace rattling against the Ohio winter outside. For a few seconds, I stared at the ceiling, convincing myself I imagined everything from the night before. People do that when the truth feels too ugly to carry. They bargain with reality. Maybe I heard wrong and really did call about work. Maybe Claire was just tired. But then I rolled over and saw her asleep beside me, phone tucked under her pillow like something worth protecting. And that feeling came back. Heavy, cold, certain. Claire used to sleep with her hand resting against my chest. 14 years together creates little habits like that. Small, unconscious things that make a marriage feel alive. Somewhere along the way, those habits disappeared. I just never noticed when. Or maybe I noticed and kept lying to myself because the alternative sounded lonelier than denial. I got out of bed quietly and headed downstairs. The hardwood floor felt cold against my feet. Coffee brewed while darkness still covered the backyard. The kitchen smelled like burnt roast and rain-soaked wood from the deck outside. I stood there staring at the window above the sink, thinking about who Claire used to be, before everything became polished smiles and locked screens. We met when I was 28 at a charity softball event outside Dayton. She wore a Cincinnati Reds cap and laughed at my terrible throw from third base. Back then she was easy to read. Loud laugh, honest eyes. The kind of woman who danced barefoot in kitchens and sang along badly to classic rock stations while cleaning the house on Saturday mornings. We built our life slowly. Nothing flashy. The apartment first, then a starter home with cracked concrete steps and a furnace that sounded like it was dying every winter. I worked long hours estimating construction bids, while Claire climbed through the marketing world one promotion at a time. We were not rich, but we were stable. Middle-class American stable. 2 decent incomes, a Chevy Tahoe with one bad tire sensor nobody fixed because life gets busy. Summer cookouts with neighbors. Costco runs on Sundays. Credit card bills paid on time. The kind of marriage nobody notices because from the outside, it looks normal. Maybe that was the problem. Normal hides cracks better than chaos does. Looking back now, the warning signs feel obvious. Claire started traveling more about 2 years earlier. Conferences in Chicago, networking weekends in Nashville, marketing retreats at lakeside resorts where everybody suddenly needed matching polo shirts and cocktail hours. At first I encouraged it because that is what supportive husbands are supposed to do. You cheer for your wife. You believe her success belongs to both of you. But slowly her world stopped including me. She stopped asking how my day went, stopped sitting beside me during movies, stopped reaching for my hand during drives.
Little things. Tiny absences.
That is how distance enters a marriage. Quietly. One missing brick at a time, until suddenly the wall collapses and you stand there pretending you did not hear it crack months ago.
Around 6:30, Claire came downstairs wearing gray sweatpants and one of those oversized sweaters that made her look softer than she really was becoming. "You are up early," she said. Her voice sounded normal. Too normal. I slid a mug of coffee toward her and watched carefully. Married people become amateur detectives without realizing it. We study pauses, expressions, the way someone avoids eye contact for half a second too long. Claire thanked me and opened her phone immediately, thumb moving fast, tiny smile appearing and disappearing before she noticed me watching. "Big plans today?" I asked casually. "Just meetings," she said without looking up. "Nathan is helping us prep the Monday presentation." There it was again. His name. Calm, casual, repeated enough to sound harmless. My stomach tightened, but I kept my face still. Years working construction bids teaches you something important. The first man who loses control usually loses everything else after. Claire finally looked up and smiled at me over the rim of her coffee mug. Beautiful smile. Familiar smile. The same smile from our wedding photos sitting framed 10 feet away in the living room. "You okay?" she asked again. I nodded slowly. "Just tired." She reached across the counter and squeezed my hand for barely a second before letting go. It should have comforted me. Instead, it felt rehearsed, like a performance she had already perfected somewhere else. And the worst part was not the suspicion anymore. It was realizing my wife still thought I knew nothing. By Friday afternoon, I realized suspicion changes the way a man sees ordinary things. Suddenly, every detail starts carrying weight. Every silence feels intentional. Every smile looks measured. I spent most of the day at the hospital project site outside Columbus, pretending to focus on steel delivery schedules, while my brain replayed Claire's voice from the night before over and over again. "He still believes me." The sentence sat in my head like a nail under skin. Around 2:30, I climbed into my truck during lunch and listened to the recording again. Rain crackled softly against the windshield while Claire's voice filled the cab through my phone speaker. Calm, relaxed, comfortable. That was the part that hollowed me out. She did not sound guilty. She sounded safe. Safe enough to laugh. Nathan's voice followed hers, low and smooth. "Expects anything?" Then Claire laughed softly again. Daniel notices concrete cracks better than people. I remember gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned pale, not because she insulted me. Marriage survives insults. What destroyed something inside me was hearing my wife describe me like a problem already solved. I shut the recording off halfway through and sat there staring at the frozen construction yard beyond my windshield. Forklifts moved through slush. Men in reflective jackets carried lumber through the cold. Life kept moving, while mine felt paused somewhere between denial and disaster. Looking back now, the signs had been everywhere long before that phone call. About 8 months earlier, Claire suddenly became obsessed with privacy. New passwords, phone face down at dinner, bathroom trips that lasted just long enough for whispered conversations behind locked doors. At first, I blamed stress because that is what decent husbands do. We explain away what hurts us. We call distance exhaustion. We call secrecy independence. We call emotional absence a rough season. Anything except what it actually is. Around 4:30, my phone buzzed while I was reviewing cost overruns beside the temporary trailer office. Claire. I stared at her name for a second before answering. "Hey," I said. "Hey yourself," she replied brightly. Too brightly. "Do not forget dinner tomorrow with Melissa and Grant." Melissa was Claire's closest friend from work. Grant barely spoke during gatherings unless football was on television. "Right," I said. "At their place?" "No," Claire answered. "Downtown at Bellamy's." That caught my attention immediately because Bellamy's was expensive. White tablecloth expensive. Reservation weeks ahead expensive. "What are we celebrating?" I asked casually. Claire paused for half a second too long. "Melissa got promoted." Another pause. "Nathan will probably be there too since he worked on the campaign." There it was again. Nathan. Always casually inserted into conversation like she was slowly training me to stop noticing his name. "Sounds fun," I said quietly. Claire laughed softly. "You okay? You sound weird lately." Weird. That word again. Funny how people rewrite your reactions once they need you doubting yourself. "Long week," I replied. "That hospital bit is a mess." "You work too hard," she said gently. The old Claire used to say that with concern. This version sounded distracted, like she was checking a box in a conversation she needed finished. After we hung up, I noticed one of the younger foremen watching me from beside the trailer. "Everything good at home?" he asked carefully. I forced a smile. "Yeah, just tired." Men say that a lot. Tired. It covers almost everything. That evening, I got home before Claire for the first time all week. The house sat dark except for fading sunset bleeding through the blinds. I loosened my tie, tossed my keys on the counter, and walked upstairs to shower. Halfway down the hallway, I noticed Claire's office door cracked open slightly. Her laptop glowed on the desk inside. I should have kept walking. I knew that even then. But betrayal changes your relationship with morality. Once trust dies, boundaries start dying with it. I stepped into the room slowly. Her perfume lingered faintly in the air mixed with coffee and printer paper. The laptop screen displayed an open calendar. Meetings, marketing calls, travel schedules, normal things. Then a message notification slid briefly across the corner of the screen before disappearing. Nathan Reed. Tomorrow night should be interesting. My chest tightened instantly. Before I could think twice, I clicked the notification. The message thread opened. Most of it was work-related. Presentations, budgets, venue details. But buried between them sat one line sent 30 minutes earlier. Nathan wrote, "Do you think he is starting to figure it out?" Claire replied with a laughing emoji, followed by 4 words that turned my stomach cold. "Daniel trusts me completely." I stared at the screen while the furnace hummed downstairs, and darkness slowly filled the room around me. V pulling into the driveway. The sound of Claire's SUV pulling into the driveway snapped me out of whatever shock I had drifted into standing there in her office. My heartbeat slammed hard against my ribs while her laptop still glowed in front of me like evidence left out under a spotlight. Daniel trusts me completely. 4 simple words. I read them again, even though I already wished I had not. Funny thing about trust. People talk about it like it breaks all at once. It does not. It erodes slowly, like river water wearing down concrete year after year, until one day the structure simply gives out beneath its own weight. I closed the message thread quickly and stepped away from the desk, just as the garage door rumbled open downstairs. My first instinct was panic, not anger, panic. Because once you know the truth,
Your whole body starts acting like it has crossed into enemy territory. Every sound feels dangerous. Every movement feels exposed. I walked calmly into the bathroom across the hall and turned the shower on full blast, even though my hands were shaking badly enough I almost dropped my phone. Downstairs, I heard Claire come inside, humming softly to herself. Grocery bags rustled against the kitchen counter. Cabinet doors opened and closed. Completely normal sounds.
That was the part that made betrayal feel surreal. The ordinary keeps happening while your entire reality collapses beside it. Steam filled the bathroom mirror while I stood there staring at myself. 42 years old. Tired eyes. Construction management salary. Slight gray at my temples I used to joke about with Claire during road trips. I looked like every other middle-class husband in suburban Ohio. The kind of man who fixes loose deck boards on weekends and worries about mortgage rates over black coffee at 6 in the morning. Nothing about me looked like someone whose marriage was quietly rotting from the inside. Claire knocked lightly on the bathroom door. "You taking a shower?" she called. "Yeah," I answered, forcing steadiness into my voice. "Long day. Dinner will be ready soon," she replied. Her voice sounded warm, familiar, almost loving. That hurt more than if she had sounded cold, because it meant she could lie comfortably, effortlessly, like she had practiced becoming two different people depending on who stood in front of her. During dinner, I watched her carefully without letting it show. Claire talked about work while serving roasted chicken and green beans onto our plates, like we were still some normal married couple. She mentioned deadlines, office gossip, Melissa's promotion dinner. Every now and then, Nathan's name slipped naturally into conversation, like she wanted to normalize his existence inside our marriage. "Nathan thinks the client may push the launch into spring," she said casually while sipping white wine. I nodded slowly. "Sounds stressful." Claire studied me over the rim of her glass for half a second. "You sure you are okay lately?" There it was again, the soft probing. Like she needed reassurance I was still blind. "Just tired," I replied quietly. "Hospital project is getting messy." "You work too much," she said. "Sometimes I think you notice buildings more than people." That line landed differently after reading her messages upstairs, if she realized she had already started repeating Nathan's jokes about me out loud. After dinner, Claire headed upstairs early, claiming she needed sleep before tomorrow's event. I stayed downstairs pretending to watch a basketball game, while my mind kept circling one ugly realization. I needed to stop reacting emotionally and start paying attention carefully. Because whatever this was, it had already moved beyond flirting. There was planning involved now, shared jokes, hidden conversations, confidence. People do not become that comfortable overnight. Around 11:30, the house finally went quiet. I waited another 20 minutes before heading upstairs barefoot with my phone flashlight dimmed low against the hallway wall. Claire slept curled toward the far side of the bed, soft breathing steady beneath the pale glow of moonlight leaking through the blinds. Her phone rested on the charger beside her nightstand, face down. Always face down now. Slowly I picked it up. My pulse hammered so loudly I was certain she would wake up hearing it. The screen lit immediately with a 6-digit passcode. I froze. Then something strange happened. My brain remembered the date from her new gym membership paperwork sitting on the counter 3 months earlier. Nathan's birthday. I typed the numbers carefully. The phone unlocked instantly. For a second, I just stood there staring at the screen while cold rushed through my chest. Then I opened her messages. Hundreds of texts flooded upward. Nathan. Weeks worth, maybe months. Lunches, hotel bars after conferences, complaints about me, private jokes about my routines, screenshots of conversations with Melissa discussing divorce attorneys. My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might collapse right there beside the bed. Then I found the voice memo, sent 2 nights earlier. Claire's voice filled my earbuds in a whisper sharp enough to hollow out my chest. "Relax," she laughed softly. "Daniel still trusts me completely."
If things go bad, I already know exactly how to make him look unstable.
I stopped breathing for a second. Upstairs, the furnace clicked on. Wind rattled faintly against the windows. And standing there in the darkness beside my sleeping wife, I realized this was no longer just betrayal. This was strategy. The moment you realize someone is planning against you, every instinct changes. Sleep changes. Breathing changes. Even silence starts sounding different inside your own house. I did not confront Claire after finding the messages. I did not wake her up or throw accusations into the dark like some late-night television drama. I simply locked her phone, placed it carefully back on the charger, and stood there beside the bed looking at the woman I married 14 years earlier. Moonlight stretched across her face through the blinds. She looked peaceful, innocent almost. That was the terrifying part. Betrayal rarely looks evil when it is sleeping. I walked downstairs quietly and sat alone at the kitchen table until nearly 3 a.m, while the refrigerator hummed behind me and snow drifted softly outside the windows. The voice memo kept replaying in my head. If things go bad, I already know exactly how to make him look unstable. That sentence changed everything. Up until then, I thought I was dealing with an affair, painful but simple. What I realized sitting there in the dark was much worse. Claire was already preparing a narrative, a strategy, which meant somewhere along the way, our marriage stopped being a relationship and became a negotiation I did not know I was participating in. Around sunrise, I opened my laptop and started organizing everything. Screenshots, audio recordings, dates, names, timestamps. Every message I could safely capture from memory before Claire woke up upstairs. My construction background taught me something valuable over the years. Documentation matters. Feelings do not survive legal rooms. Evidence does. By 7:30, the smell of coffee drifted through the kitchen as Claire came downstairs dressed for the gym in black leggings and a cream-colored zip-up jacket. She looked fresh-rested and beautiful in the kind of effortless way that used to make me feel lucky. "You're up early again," she said softly. I forced a tired smile. Could not sleep. She poured herself coffee and leaned casually against the counter, scrolling through her phone. "You should take a vacation," she said. "You've been tense lately." Tense. Another carefully chosen word. Not hurt, not distant. Tense. Like the problem existed entirely inside me. "Maybe after the hospital project wraps," I replied. Claire nodded absent-mindedly before smiling down at something on her screen. Tiny smile. Quick. Hidden. Most husbands probably would not notice something that small. But once trust breaks, your eyes become merciless. "Going to the gym?" I asked. "Just for an hour," she answered. "Nathan recommended this new trainer app everyone at work is using." There it was again. Nathan slipping casually into every corner of our life like cigarette smoke through old walls. "Sounds useful," I said quietly. Claire walked over and kissed the top of my head before grabbing her keys. "Try not to work all weekend," she said lightly. "Tomorrow is supposed to be fun." Then she left. The garage door closed. Silence filled the house again. I waited until her SUV disappeared down the street before making another decision I never imagined I would have to make in my own marriage. I called a lawyer. His office sat downtown above a small insurance agency near Broad Street. Older building, beige walls, the kind of place where real life quietly falls apart every single day behind closed doors. His name was Richard Holloway. Gray suit, calm eyes, wedding ring worn smooth from years of use. He listened without interrupting while I explained the recordings, the messages, the voice memo. I noticed he stopped taking notes for a second when I repeated Claire's line about making me appear unstable. "You did the right thing by staying calm," he said carefully. "The second someone starts building a narrative against you, emotional reactions become dangerous." Dangerous. Funny word to hear describing your own marriage. Richard advised me to keep documenting everything. No confrontations, no threats, no emotional texts. You would be surprised how many decent men destroy themselves trying to defend their pride, he said quietly. Stay patient. On the drive home, snow dusted lightly across the windshield while his words echoed in my head. Stay patient. That was the hard part, because every instinct inside me wanted answers immediately. I wanted Claire to explain how we became strangers, living inside the same walls. I wanted to know when she stopped loving me, or maybe worse, when she started pretending she still did. But patience became my only real advantage now. That evening, Claire curled beside me on the couch, while some home renovation show played quietly on television. Her legs rested across my lap beneath a blanket we bought during a trip to Gatlinburg years earlier. She laughed at something on screen and leaned her head briefly against my shoulder. Warm, familiar, intimate.
Our living room window at that exact moment, they would have seen an ordinary American marriage. Comfortable couple, quiet weekend, stable life. They would never have guessed I had recordings of my wife planning against me, saved inside a hidden folder on my phone, while she sat inches away pretending none of it existed. Gaslighting does not begin with screaming. It begins with small corrections to your reality. Tiny little rewrites designed to make you question your own instincts before you even realize somebody is doing it to you. By the middle of the next week, Claire had become almost unbelievably attentive. That should have comforted me.
It terrified me. She started texting me during the day again, asking how the hospital project was going, sending photos of coffee cups from downtown cafes with captions like, "Thinking about you." She even suggested we plan a spring vacation once work slowed down. To anybody else, it would have looked like a wife reconnecting with her husband. But I knew too much now. Every smile carried fingerprints on it. Every kind gesture felt rehearsed. Tuesday night, we sat across from each other at the kitchen island while snow drifted softly outside the windows and some local weather anchor talked about black ice on Interstate 70. Claire scrolled through her phone before suddenly looking up at me with a small frown. "Can I ask you something?" she said carefully. "Sure. Have you been checking up on me lately?" The question hit quietly but directly. My pulse tightened immediately, even though I kept my face calm. "What do you mean?" Claire set her wineglass down slowly. "You have just seemed suspicious lately. Distant. Like you are studying me." There it was. The first real pivot. Not guilt, not confession. Redirection. I leaned back slightly in my chair. "I've been stressed with work." "Daniel," she sighed softly, "you have barely touched me in weeks."
That almost made me laugh out loud, because the truth sat so backwards between us it felt unreal. But this is how manipulation works. The guilty person slowly positions themselves as the neglected one. "I am tired," I replied quietly. Claire shook her head with the kind of disappointment designed to make decent men feel ashamed. "You always say that now." Silence settled across the kitchen for a moment, while the dishwasher hummed softly behind us. Then she looked directly into my eyes and delivered the line I think she had been building toward for days. "Sometimes I think you create problems in your head because you do not know how to slow down." There it was. Instability, stress, emotional distance.
She was already laying the foundation, brick by brick, exactly like the voice memo warned me she would. I remembered what Richard Holloway told me downtown. Stay patient. Emotional reactions become dangerous. So, instead of arguing, I nodded slowly. Maybe you were right. Claire visibly relaxed after that answer. Tiny shift in her shoulders, tiny exhale. She thought the strategy was working. Over the next several days, the pressure increased in subtle ways. Melissa suddenly started texting Claire constantly whenever I was nearby. Group dinners got scheduled without asking me first. Nathan's name appeared more openly in conversation now, as if they were testing how much disrespect I would tolerate before reacting. Friday afternoon, Claire stopped by my office trailer unexpectedly, carrying takeout coffee and sandwiches from a deli downtown. The younger foreman practically smiled, seeing her walk across the muddy gravel lot in a cream wool coat with snowflakes caught in her blonde hair. Claire had always known how to look perfect in public. "Thought you could use lunch," she said brightly. I thanked her and introduced her to a few newer guys on the site. Then Nathan's name slipped casually into the conversation again, like a hook dropped into water. "Nathan says your company did amazing work on the Riverside expansion last year," she said while handing me my sandwich. "Funny guy, too. You would actually like him if you stopped acting weird every time I mention him." There it was again. Weird, suspicious, tense. Little labels carefully repeated until they start sounding factual. One of the foremen laughed awkwardly and walked away, sensing something uncomfortable under the surface. Claire leaned closer, lowering her voice slightly. "You know this jealousy thing is getting exhausting, right?" Jealousy. Interesting word, considering I had never accused her of anything out loud. "I did not realize I was acting jealous," I replied calmly. Claire gave me a sad smile that looked painfully convincing. "That is the problem. You do not hear yourself anymore." Then she kissed my cheek in front of everybody and walked back toward her SUV while snow drifted around her boots. I stood there holding lukewarm coffee, watching her leave, with one ugly realization settling deeper into my chest. She was preparing witnesses now. Public perception, friendly concern, careful little comments planted inside other people's heads. If things exploded later, she wanted everyone already halfway convinced I was paranoid, unstable, and emotionally distant. That night I sat alone in my truck outside a grocery store parking lot, listening again to the recordings saved on my phone. Nathan's laugh crackled softly through the speakers. Claire's voice followed, calm, confident. "If he starts suspecting anything, I will just make it about his stress again." Snow tapped lightly against the windshield, while passing headlights rolled across the dashboard in slow waves. I realized then something important. Claire was not underestimating my intelligence. She was underestimating my patience. And those are two very different mistakes. Saturday night arrived cold and sharp, with freezing rain glazing the streets outside downtown Columbus. It sat glowing against the wet sidewalks like every expensive restaurant designed for people who cared more about appearances than comfort. Warm amber lighting, white tablecloths, piano music soft enough to sound classy, but not distracting. Claire looked stunning walking beside me through the front entrance in a dark green dress and heels that clicked softly against the marble floor. A year earlier, I would have looked at her and felt lucky. That night I looked at her and wondered how long she had been rehearsing the woman standing next to me. "Try to relax tonight," she whispered, while the hostess led us toward the private dining section. "You have been acting tense all week." There was that word again, tense, like she needed everyone around us hearing it repeatedly until it became truth. Melissa and Grant already sat at the long table near the windows overlooking High Street. Nathan sat beside Melissa, laughing at something on his phone when we approached. The second his eyes lifted toward Claire, I caught it immediately. Not lust, not even excitement, familiarity. The kind people accidentally reveal when they forget someone else is watching. "Daniel," Nathan said smoothly, standing to shake my hand. "Good to see you again, man." His grip felt confident, comfortable. Too comfortable. "You too," I replied calmly. Claire slid into the chair beside him without hesitation, while I took the seat across from them. Interesting choice for a married woman supposedly worried about her husband acting jealous. Drinks arrived quickly. Wine for Claire, bourbon for Nathan, beer for Grant. I ordered whiskey neat, mostly because I needed something cold and sharp in front of me while this entire performance unfolded. At first, the conversation stayed harmless enough. Promotions, office politics, rising housing prices around Dublin and Upper Arlington. Normal, upper-middle-class dinner conversation. But slowly the energy shifted, the way storms quietly change pressure before lightning hits. Melissa leaned toward Claire, smiling. "Tell them what happened during the Nashville conference." Claire laughed instantly. "Oh my God, no." Nathan smirked into his bourbon glass. "Now you have to tell it." I stayed quiet, watching carefully while Claire shook her head like somebody pretending embarrassment. "Daniel is going to think I'm ridiculous." Melissa laughed loudly. "Please, he already thinks all of us marketing people are insane." More laughter followed around the table. Claire finally sighed dramatically before looking directly at me. Nathan had to calm me down during a presentation because I thought I was going to faint in front of the client. Nathan smiled casually. "You almost crushed my hand under the table." Another wave of laughter rolled across the room, while Claire lightly touched Nathan's arm. Small gesture, brief, but intimate enough to tighten something cold inside my chest. "Good thing he was there," Melissa added playfully. "Daniel works too much to babysit you during conferences." Grant chuckled awkwardly into his beer, while I simply sipped my whiskey. Claire noticed my silence immediately. "See?" she laughed lightly. "That face right there. He gets weird every time Nathan comes up." There it was, publicly now, carefully planted in front of witnesses exactly like Richard warned me. Nathan leaned back in his chair, raising both hands jokingly. "Hey man, I promise I am not stealing your wife." The table laughed again, even Claire, especially Claire. Funny thing about humiliation. It is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives wrapped in laughter, polite enough to make you look crazy if you react to it. I set my glass down carefully against the tablecloth. "I never said you were," I replied evenly. Melissa exchanged a quick glance with Claire before smiling too brightly. "Daniel has just been stressed lately," Claire explained softly to the table, like she was discussing a difficult child. "He gets these ideas in his head sometimes." Ideas. There it was. The narrative moving into public now. Nathan shook his head sympathetically. "Construction work will do that to you. Long hours, too much pressure." I looked directly at him for the first time all night. "You seem pretty familiar with my marriage for somebody in marketing." Silence flickered briefly across the table, before Claire laughed too quickly. "See? This is what I mean." Melissa leaned toward me with fake concern written all over her face.
Daniel, nobody here is attacking you.
That line almost impressed me with how cleanly it redirected everything. Suddenly, I was not the husband quietly enduring disrespect. I was the uncomfortable one, ruining dinner. Claire reached for my hand across the table, performing concern perfectly.
"Babe," she said softly enough for everyone to hear, "I think you have been letting stress make you paranoid lately." Paranoid. The word landed softly but deliberately. Nathan lowered his eyes into his drink, trying badly not to smirk. Around us, silverware clinked gently against plates, while conversations from nearby tables drifted through warm restaurant lighting. Nobody else in Bellamy's knew my marriage was being dissected in real time beneath polished wine glasses and fake concern. Claire squeezed my hand again like she was calming an unstable man. Then she smiled at everyone around the table and said the one sentence that finally made something inside me go completely still.
Daniel always imagines the worst when there is nothing there. For a few seconds after Claire called me paranoid, nobody at the table spoke. The pianist near the bar kept playing softly, while glasses clinked somewhere behind us, and waiters moved through Bellamy's carrying plates under warm yellow light. The whole restaurant felt strangely far away from me suddenly, like I was sitting underwater watching my own marriage happen from a distance. Claire still held my hand across the table, wearing that same patient expression people use with someone they think is overreacting emotionally. Melissa looked uncomfortable now, but not because of guilt, because scenes like this make people nervous.
Nathan stayed quiet beside Claire, staring into his bourbon glass with the kind of controlled calm that told me he thought they had already won. And honestly, maybe they believed they had. From the outside, the situation looked simple enough. Overworked husband, successful wife, harmless co-worker friendship, stress, misunderstandings. That was the genius of what Claire built. Everything stayed just believable enough to make me look irrational if I pushed too hard. I looked down at Claire's hand resting over mine. Wedding ring catching soft candlelight. 14 years together reduced to a performance happening between appetizers and dessert. Then I smiled. Not a fake smile.
Angry one either. Just calm. "You're right," I said quietly. Claire blinked once, clearly surprised by the lack of resistance. "About what?" she asked softly. I leaned back slightly in my chair and picked up my whiskey glass. Maybe I have been imagining things. Relief flickered across her face so fast most people would have missed it. Nathan finally relaxed his shoulders beside her. Melissa gave a tiny, awkward laugh like tension had finally passed. "See?" Claire smiled warmly, squeezing my hand again. "That is all I have been trying to say." I nodded slowly. "You know what the funny part is?" Claire tilted her head slightly. I took my phone calmly from inside my jacket pocket and placed it face up on the white tablecloth between the wine glasses. I almost convinced myself, too. The table went still. Nathan's eyes dropped immediately toward the phone. Claire's smile faded slightly, but only for a second. "Daniel," she said carefully, "what are you doing?" I ignored the question. Around us, the restaurant noise continued normally, while our little corner of Bellamy's suddenly felt airless. "You spent weeks telling me stress was making me paranoid," I said evenly. "You told people I was imagining things." Claire shifted in her chair, forcing a nervous laugh. "Because you are acting strange." "Maybe," I replied calmly.
Or maybe I finally started paying attention. Nathan leaned forward slightly. "Hey man, I think this is getting a little dramatic." Dramatic. Interesting word coming from a man secretly involved with somebody else's wife. I looked directly at him. You should probably stay quiet for the next minute. His jaw tightened immediately. Claire's voice sharpened slightly now. Daniel, stop! But I was already pressing play. At first, only soft restaurant noise came through the speaker. Faint road sounds. A turn signal clicking somewhere in the background.
Then Claire's voice filled the center of the table, clear enough to cut through every remaining ounce of denial in the room. Relax. Daniel still trusts me completely. Nobody moved. Nathan's face drained instantly of color, while Claire froze beside him, staring at the phone like it had turned into a loaded weapon sitting between the bread plates. The recording continued. Nathan's voice followed quietly through the speaker. You think he suspects anything? Then Claire laughed. That same soft laugh I heard outside our kitchen days earlier. Daniel notices concrete cracks better than people. Melissa covered her mouth slowly with one hand. Grant stared directly down into his beer like he wanted the table to swallow him alive. Claire finally found her voice. Daniel, turn that off right now. I did not. The next recording started automatically because I'd cued them carefully beforehand. Claire's own voice drifted into the stunned silence surrounding us. Calm, confident, cruel in a way only honesty can sound when somebody forgets they are being recorded. If things go bad, I already know exactly how to make him look unstable. Nathan shut his eyes briefly. Claire stopped breathing for half a second. Around us, silverware clinked faintly from distant tables, while the people closest to our section slowly started noticing something was wrong. Claire grabbed for the phone, but I lifted it calmly before she could touch it. No, I said quietly. Not angry, not loud. Just finished. Tears filled her eyes instantly now, but even then I could not tell whether they came from guilt or panic. Daniel, please, she whispered. Nathan looked like somebody had kicked the floor out from under him. Melissa stared at Claire with an expression halfway between shock and disgust. Nobody at that table looked at me like I was paranoid anymore. And suddenly the silence Claire spent weeks building around me belonged entirely to her. Nobody at the table knew what to do after the recordings stopped. That was the strange thing about truth when it finally enters a room. It does not explode the way people expect. It drains everything instead. Noise, confidence, pretending. Bellamy's still glowed warm around us, while soft piano music drifted through the restaurant, and waiters carried steaks beneath hanging lights, like the world had not just shifted sideways at our table. But inside that silence, everything changed. Claire stared at me with tears collecting beneath her mascara, while Nathan looked down at the tablecloth, like he was searching for an exit hidden inside the fabric. Melissa finally leaned back slowly in her chair. Claire, she whispered, voice thin with disbelief. What the hell is this? Claire opened her mouth once, but nothing came out immediately. For the first time in weeks, she looked unprepared. Not angry, not manipulative, cornered. It is not what it sounds like, she said finally, and the sentence landed so weakly, even she seemed embarrassed hearing it out loud. Grant rubbed one hand across his face and stood up quietly. I'm getting another drink, he muttered before walking away. Because some men know when a situation no longer belongs to them. Nathan cleared his throat, trying to recover first. Daniel, listen, he started carefully. Nothing actually happened between us. I looked directly at him. Calm. Empty. That is your defense? He blinked hard, but said nothing else. Claire finally reached toward me across the table again, but this time I pulled my hand away before she could touch it. That seemed to hurt her more than the recordings themselves. Daniel,
she whispered. Please, let me explain.
Funny word, explain. As if there were still confusion left between us.
I sat there for a second, looking at the woman I spent 14 years building a life beside. Vacations, Christmas mornings, mortgage payments, late-night pharmacy runs when she got sick. Thousands of ordinary moments stitched together into something I thought was permanent.
And maybe that was the hardest part. Betrayal does not erase the good memories. It poisons them.
You already explained everything, I said, quietly nodding toward the phone resting beside my whiskey glass. Claire's tears finally slipped free then. Real tears this time. Her voice cracked slightly. I was angry. I vented. That does not mean I stopped loving you. Loving me. Another interesting phrase. Because people who love you do not quietly build narratives to destroy your credibility before leaving. They do not laugh about your trust with somebody else over late-night phone calls. Nathan shifted beside her, visibly uncomfortable now. Maybe I should leave, he muttered. Yeah, Melissa snapped, suddenly turning toward him with sharp disgust in her eyes. You probably should. Nathan grabbed his coat without another word and walked away from the table fast enough to make it obvious even he understood there was no recovering from what everybody just heard. Claire watched him disappear toward the front entrance, and for the first time I saw panic fully replace control on her face. Not because Nathan mattered more than our marriage, because her strategy just collapsed in public. The stable husband she spent weeks quietly reframing as paranoid had remained calm while her own voice destroyed the story for him. Melissa looked at Claire like she no longer recognized her. You told me Daniel was overreacting, she said softly. Claire wiped beneath her eyes quickly. Melissa, please. No, Melissa interrupted, shaking her head slowly. You made him sound unstable. Claire looked toward me desperately then. Daniel, I never wanted this to happen like this. I almost laughed at that, because people always say that after consequences finally arrive. Nobody plans for exposure. They only plan for secrecy. I stood up slowly, slipping my phone back into my jacket pocket. My untouched whiskey still sat half full beside the candle burning quietly in the center of the table. Claire's eyes widened immediately. Where are you going? She asked.
Home, I replied calmly. We need to talk.
Not tonight,
I said softly.
Tonight I am done listening.
Her face collapsed then in a way I will probably remember for the rest of my life. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just realization finally settling into somebody who thought they still had control of the room. Around us, conversations continued normally, while servers carried desserts past our table under warm light and polished silver. Nobody else inside Bellamy's understood a marriage had just ended beside the windows overlooking High Street. I left cash beneath my glass for the bill and started toward the exit without looking back immediately. Halfway to the front door, I finally stopped and turned once more toward the table. Claire sat frozen beneath soft restaurant lighting, while Melissa stared silently beside her. The empty chair Nathan left behind somehow said more than anything else in the room. Then I walked outside into the freezing Ohio rain, alone. Cold air hit my face sharp and clean, while headlights reflected across wet pavement downtown. For weeks, Claire tried convincing everyone that I was unstable, confused, paranoid. But standing there beneath the streetlights, with rain soaking slowly into my coat, I felt calmer than I had in months. Because the truth does something strange once it finally gets spoken out loud. It stops chasing you. And people think revenge sounds loud, angry, dramatic. They are wrong. The real kind sounds exactly like silence after the lies finally run out.
Thank you for watching until the end. Watch the full story in the comments and video description. Like and subscribe to the channel to see more interesting content.